Welcome to press coverage. I am Theo Gremminger, and I'm joined by Jared Smola of Draft Sharks. Jared has podcasted with me like a dozen times at this point. He's been extremely generous when coming on the GOAT District. He joined Billy Muzio and I on First Class Fantasy. He's definitely one of my favorite people to kind of chop it up with. We don't even need a show sheet, Jared. That's how that's like where we're at right now. But it's funny because we start talking and then the JSN news breaks. So let's react to that one. Jared, what are you thinking with this injury? Do you believe what they're saying that he's going to be ready for week one?
I'm hoping we get more details, which I'm sure we will over the next, 24 or 48 hours. My initial reaction is I hope it just drops his ADP by a round or two. Because honestly, I don't have as much JSN in redraft as I would like. And a lot of it's because I'm still taking Lockett over him straight up, which has become a bit.
You're a boomer, Jared. You're a boomer.
I'm a boomer.
You're a boomer.
I'm a Tyler Lockett boomer. He's my guy. But honestly, every freaking time I watch JSN in these preseason games, I get a bit worried that I don't have enough of him. So I don't know. I mean, a wrist injury for a wideout is a little scary. But again, if I can start to get JSN in round 6, 7, I'm gonna take a shot on him there.
Yeah, so I got him in the 7th round of an NFFC draft the other night, which I thought was incredible value. That's a start 3 wide receiver in a flex format. It's very wide receiver heavy, but the rooms are getting a little funny with kind of the quarterback enthusiasm. So, you're still able to see some of those values, but I don't know. I think he's pretty insulated. I don't think he's going to drop past the 7th, especially with these very positive reports. But I think that for me, the cascade effect, Jared, is, we're going to talk about some of these wide receiver risers, but like as these drafts start going, getting closer to the opening game of the season, and then like the FFPC drafts in Vegas, the 6th round is going to become a wide receiver round, like completely. And a lot of these running backs that we like in the 6th round are going to get pushed to the 7th. Last night I'm in a draft, and Miles Sanders is sitting there in the 7th round. Cam Akers is sitting there in the 7th. James Conner is always sitting there in the 7th. DeAndre Swift is sitting there in the 7th. And on the flip side, we're starting to see the wide receiver enthusiasm go up and up. And then when you couple the JSN news with the McLaurin news, and they can paint a beautiful picture any way they want about how these are like light injuries, but they lie. They don't tell us the truth. So why should we listen to them on that? What about McLaurin? How concerned are you with him?
Turf toe, scary too, right? I mean, it's a injury that we've seen linger and like sap guys' explosiveness. So McLaurin's not a guy I've drafted a ton of. I view him as like a floor play. Even if you look at his production over the last 3 years, like it's been like wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 25, like fine. Like that's about where he's going. And I think he'll probably deliver that type of production again this season. I just don't see a ton of upside beyond that, especially with Jahan Dotson's emergence and his, ascension. It looks like he's going to take a step forward in year 2. So at this point, I'd rather, especially with the toe injury now, I would rather take Jahan Dotson at cost than Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And I want to dive into some of those guys in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about some of the cool stuff you guys are doing at Draft Sharks. Big shout out to you and Matt. You guys both crushed it, helping out with our world famous draft kit. You guys dropped really, really quality content and great entries. And I've enjoyed podcasting with you guys. But how about what you're doing over at Draft Sharks? Because you do some very, very exciting articles during the summer. And a couple of them have become like appointment reads for high stakes managers, especially a lot of these FFPC ones. You had a pretty big hit a couple years ago. What was that player that you predicted? I don't recall, Jared, but it's like your calling card. What is it?
Yeah, Cooper Kupp was our comeback player 2 years ago. That was a nice one. We actually had Saquon Barkley as our comeback last year. We had a ton of him, and that worked out nicely too. So yeah, we have our comeback player, early round bust, and breakout pick up on the site now for insiders. We have our round by round draft plan up. That's actually a free article this year, so you could check that out, kind of literally round by round for each pick, how I'm attacking PPR drafts right now. And the big thing though is our projections. I mean, that's what I'm grinding on most of the day at this point, just grinding the news, grinding preseason action, making sure those projections are as up to date as possible, because we've been drafting for what, 6 months now, but these next 2-3 weeks, this is it, right? So we want to make sure everything is as tight as possible on the site.
Time is like a flat circle, Jared. It seems like it's just draft podcast, this time of year, but it's a lot of fun. This is why we do it. Before we get to break, I want to ask you one question. Is I've asked everybody this on First Class Fantasy press coverage, everybody for the last month and a half. If you could know the final, and especially with your ranking acumen, if you could know the final stats of any single player in the league right now, who would it be? What's that one player that's kind of giving you pause, that have a big range of outcomes? Maybe his performance unlocks a teammate.
Yeah, I love this question. I think the answer really should be a quarterback, just because it gives you the info on him and all his weapons, just the offense in general. To me, this year it's Deshaun Watson, who, man, if he is the player he was over those final 6 games or whatever it was last season, the Browns offense is obviously in trouble. Watson's in trouble and all of his pass catchers. But if Deshaun Watson is the guy that he was in Houston, who was an elite passer with big time rushing upside, if he's that guy, Deshaun Watson could, probably not challenge the big 3, but he could at least, finish as a top 5 quarterback for sure. And then there could be big values all over that offense. So it would definitely be Deshaun Watson for me.
I love the Deshaun Watson answer. That's actually the one I've been saying, as the one for my answer to this question, because, it's not just Deshaun. We also see so many Cleveland Browns getting steamed up in ADP. And also with the quarterback enthusiasm right now, if you can sit around and wait and get Deshaun Watson, I mean, you talk about him returning to his old Houston days. If he can just return like QB6 value, I think that would be, a nice bargain. And it's funny because there's so much negativity towards that Cleveland offense the last, week and a half, 2 weeks. Been a couple of hit pieces on how they look, in training camp. And, people are starting to, the steam is kind of a little less than it was last time we talked, Jared. Any concerns over these kind of, preseason, nitpicking by the media?
Not really. To me, it was that one Athletic article that just kind of caught fire. And that's what happens in our circles, right? Like one article, someone retweets it, Roto World makes a blurb about it, and then it's all over the place. I was even, I was scrolling 32 beat writers, which I'm sure you know about, Theo.
Yeah.
You folks listening don't know. It's my favorite follow during training camp. They just retweet basically everything you need to know from all these camps. Even on Monday, there were 4 straight positive tweets about how Deshaun Watson looked in that practice. So again, I agree he has a wide range of outcomes. But like you said, where he's going in drafts and for the type of upside he gives you, Watson and that Browns passing game, I'm definitely still in on.
And you bring up an interesting point because, you're not an old guy, but you've been doing this a long time. And, you see every summer it gets more and more amplified how much information we get coming in, from the media, from beat reporters, from fantasy analysts, and then from, fantasy highlight clips. Pretty much anything you could think of is now instantly, at our hands. Whereas years ago, you would wait for certain reports, you'd wait for snap counts. It was a little less in your face. How do you filter out real news, real actionable information with just kind of the fluff and the steam coming out of these places? How do you do it, Jared?
I wish I could give you an answer. I feel like for me, I just kind of sort of let it wash over me, just take in everything and just sort of, I don't know, use my instincts, to use a word that I know my buddy Adam Krautwurst likes to use, and just use instincts, take it all in, kind of think about what makes sense based on our priors. I do think going back to all the work we did in February and March and April, projecting these teams out, I think, going back to that is important at this time of year. But there's no secret I can give you. For me, it's just sort of taking it all in and making the best educated guesses as we can.
No, absolutely, for sure. For me, I think a lot of it is, people want to hear their voices. A lot of fantasy Twitter, that's a lot of how these small beat writers are. So for me, it's like, if I haven't heard of the beat writer and he's doesn't seem like somebody completely locked in, you got to think that you got to take it with a grain of salt. I do like the idea of a constant drumbeat or positive vibes with a player where, the teammates, head coach, and media are all kind of in lockstep. I think that sometimes we should pay attention to that a little more than we do. But yeah, I think a lot of it can just kind of get us in trouble. And do you think that drafters might be, when are drafters at their sharpest? This is kind of a weird question, but do you feel like sometimes people know more and are better prepared on August 1st than they are on August 30th?
No, I think the, quote unquote sharper drafters are better at the end of the month. Now, drafts in general might be weaker because you're having, folks that haven't been doing this for 6 months, getting into those draft rooms. But I do think as a community, we know more by the end of August than we did on August 1st.
No, absolutely. When we come back, we're going to talk about a number of things that are going to help you win your leagues. We're going to talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown's Steam. We're going to talk about a couple of Jared's favorite handcuffs to draft right now. And we're going to dive back into the draft plan articles from Draft Sharks. And we're going to tell you how to win your league from the middle of the first round.
Hey, people always ask me, what's the World Series of Fantasy? What's the Super Bowl of Fantasy? And it's easy. It's the FFPC. Their signature Players Championship has a $6 million prize pool. And their best ball leagues start in February. And they're the answer to so many questions. Hey, what's the best place to get a Dynasty Orphan? Well, you can adopt a Dynasty Orphan at the FFPC right now. There's more orphans at the FFPC than anywhere else on the internet. That's why we partner with them. So if you want to play fantasy football for low, medium, high stakes, you love Dynasty, you love best ball, you love seasonal leagues, all types of fantasy footballers need to go to the FFPC. And remember, use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you $25 off your first team. Promo code Underworld, $25 off your first team, no matter what the format is, at the FFPC. Go get it.
So you had mentioned, your comeback player of the year, your bust, and your breakout. I loved all of them. I sent you and Matt Schoaf a couple of nice messages. I thought your picks were great. And I know that, this was a kind of a difficult year for some of those selections. But one article that you mentioned is free right now that I think is also kind of appointment reading for Draft Sharks is the draft plan articles. And the way that you guys set this up, you will give not only like your first round target, but you follow through with each round in a way to kind of prepare your draft structurally. I think it's a help even for experienced drafters to read what Matt and Jared are trying to say, because you guys have a lot of great ideas about being able to make up at certain positions if you pass for another one at this level and this level. So let's dive right into it. You're in the middle of the first round, Jared. What is your ideal scenario when you're picking out of the 6th pick or the 7th pick?
Yeah, and by the way, I think like the 6th, 7th pick is probably my least favorite spot to draft this year. I'd rather have a top 2 spot or be picking at the very end of round 1.
Well, Jared, you picked the wrong day. If you came on yesterday,
yes.
Your fellow upstate Western New York guy, Mike Leone, was in the house, and we talked about the 101 and the 112. So if you want to talk about the end of the first round and you want to talk about the beginning of the first round, tune into yesterday's episode. If you want to talk about the middle, Jared's your guy.
Yeah, I accept your challenge. In the middle of round 1, I'm hoping Cooper Kupp or Tyreek Hill make it to me. And Hill often has, and Kupp had been when he was out with the hamstring. I think now that he's back on the field, that's probably going to be less often. So I guess Tyreek Hill is probably my most likely target there. If he's gone, I'm deciding between Stephon Diggs and Austin Eckler. I think you can make a good case for either of those guys. I think, what you're going to do in the next couple of rounds should maybe impact which way you lean there. Because I do think it's pretty much a toss-up between those two.
Yeah, I was actually at the 108 last night with our friend Abib Agbatoba and Scott Barrett. And you can watch the rest of the draft. It's dropping tomorrow right here on Player Profiler. But we went with Stephon Diggs over Eckler. And I think that was like it doesn't feel as exciting to take Stephon Diggs in the middle of the first round. You are a Bills guy. Why don't you talk a little bit about Diggs? Like for me, I'm fine with it, but I look at him as a foundational piece that's not going to lose me the first round. I think I'm going to get, somewhere like a 17 point per game season, and it puts me in a position that I structurally am okay. Do you see him as more than that, or are you kind of on that same train?
Yeah, I'm with you there. He's Diggs is like a rich man's McLaurin, right? Where like I feel good about him finishing between like.
Got to say something nicer than that, Jared. That doesn't get my blood. He's a very rich man. He's a billionaire, Terry McLaurin.
Exactly. He's going to finish somewhere between wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 7. I don't think he's very likely to lead the position in fantasy points, but I think he's safe. And, sometimes in the first round, safety is good enough.
So we're on Eckler or Diggs there. Is there anybody that you would consider pushing into that spot? Maybe if somebody doesn't like an Eckler or a Diggs, or are you of the opinion that take a faller instead of those guys, or, capitulate to them for some?
I mean, I'm definitely higher than market on Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
And he's probably now, I've seen him start to slip close to the mid-second in recent drafts, which is surprising me.
I think it's right now. I think it's not to interrupt you, but I think it's, I've been in a bunch of these and I agree. Like Saquon, it's, he's going to be selected somewhere between 8 and like 15, 16.
Yep.
But where he's selected kind of depends on the way the draft is going. Like he's an absolute lock, and 16 might even be an exaggeration. Let's call it like 8 to 15. Like, and I don't think he's going to drop below that. I don't think he's going to go before that. But I agree with you. It's a little less predictable this year, kind of in that back half of the first.
Yeah, I don't see a huge gap between CMC, Eckler, and Barkley.
Yeah,
I think Barkley should be going closer to those other two backs than he is. So, if you wanted to make sure you get Saquon, I would have no issue taking him at 7 or 8.
Okay, so using the Draft Sharks plan, I now have Stephon Diggs or I have Austin Eckler. Now I get down to the middle of the second round. You're looking at guys like Tony Pollard. You're looking at Devontae Adams. You're looking at Jalen Waddle. Chris Olave a little bit behind. Derrick Henry a little bit behind. And then for our tight end premium drafters, occasionally Mark Andrews goes there. I've been seeing a little more Mark Andrews towards the 1-2 turn, but occasionally he drops to like 16, 17, 18. Where are you at with how to maximize this build?
So I'd be pounding Mark Andrews if he made it to me in the mid-second. He comes in, I think, just outside the top 10 in our overall tight end premium ranking. So even at like the 1-2 turn, that's kind of where I start to consider Andrews. Outside of tight end premium, I am praying Tony Pollard makes it to me in the mid-second. It seems like that's happening less and less often. If Pollard's gone, it gets tough for me. I guess Devontae Adams, then probably Garrett Wilson would be my next two most likely targets if Pollard is not there.
Yeah, so Devontae Adams was who we selected last night, after the Diggs pick. So it was a kind of an older wide receiver room, but guys with predictable volume and high ceilings. So I'm with you. I think Tony Pollard might be the most dangerous middle of the second round pick right now. But again, much like Barkley, he's kind of it's unpredictable where he goes. I've seen him go as high as 10 in some of these high stakes drafts. And then, like you said, once in a while you can get him right smack dab in the middle. I have a second round Pollard the other day from an NFFC draft. And I love that. I love that value. Do you see him as a potential RB1 overall this year, Jared?
Potential, yeah. I mean, man, where else is that work going to go, right? Like, I mean, Deuce Vaughn's looked good. I get it, but he's, 180 pounds. I don't see him taking a ton of work. Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis, like, and I don't really want Tony Pollard getting 22 touches per game, but I mean, he might end up getting close to that the way that backfield looks right now. He's just super explosive, and it's still going to be a top 10 offense, I think. So yeah, I think he definitely has a good shot at like top 3 production, and I think RB1 overall is not out of his range of outcomes.
Just give me like 5 catches a game. That's my dream scenario for Tony Pollard. If they can get him the ball out in space on receptions, let him touch it all he wants on those ones, Jared. But I agree. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's going to be able to handle north of 200. I think 225 carries would be really a lot for him. But we'll see. Yep. We'll see. Apparently, he's and not necessarily bulked up, but he's in shape for this run. The coaches, have a little bit more of a feel that he can handle a little bit more inside. So we're on that train. Okay, now we get to the third round. Let's say that any way you cut it with your plan, I'm balanced. I'm at a running back and a wide receiver. Middle of the third, where are we at?
So this is very likely a wide receiver for me. The exception would be if Mark Andrews is there in a non-tight end premium. I like him in the middle of round 3. Otherwise, I'm looking wide receiver. The two guys I've been taking most often here are T. Higgins and Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I like those picks a lot. We talked about, we'll talk a little bit more about that Chargers offense because I know you're very much into them. T. Higgins is funny. I had this conversation with Mike Leone yesterday. He's bullish on him. I like him. Billy Muzio likes him, and he's a target of yours. But he's slightly polarizing. When some people see his ADP, they don't react fondly to him. They look at him as a guy with kind of a capped ceiling just because of volume. Are you on that train, or do you think we could see like a huge T. Higgins season?
I mean, the ceiling is partly capped, right? Because Jamar Chase is there, and like if Jamar Chase is healthy, he's the clear one. Even 2 years ago, Chase and Higgins were pretty close in targets, but last year Chase pulled away from Higgins, and I expect that to continue. But this Bengals offense is a candidate to lead the entire league in passing attempts. So even if you're talking about, a 20, 21, 22% target share for T. Higgins, that could still be like 130, 140 targets. To me, the reason not to click T. Higgins is he's just not fun to own, because he's always on the injury report. He always seems to be banged up. He leaves games early. So I get it. I just think if you get a even 16 game season out of T. Higgins, I think he probably returns round 2 value.
Yeah, and I love the argument that Irv Smith does not inherit the entire Hayden Hurst usage, and the Chris Evans certainly doesn't get as much as Samaje Perine did. Yeah. So we have potentially more targets going to the wide receiver position in general, and we think Tyler Boyd has regressed some, and the other target competition are 2 rookies. So I think that there's a chance that they just become a little bit more consolidated with the wide receiver targets. And, I want to paint a picture for T, because again, I like drafting him as well in that 3rd round. And I think that he's fairly safe as well though, Jared, because you do get those big spike weeks out of him that can help you win your week. So let's quickly talk about one more 3rd round target for FFPC drafters. If you're in an FFPC league, would you consider Darren Waller in the mid-3rd? Because that's where we're at.
Yeah, probably. I mean, he's sitting right behind TJ Hawkinson in our rankings now. We've been bumping Waller up like all August, and that Hawkinson Waller is kind of a tier now behind Kelsey tier 1, Andrews tier 2, then it's Hawkinson and Waller. So I wouldn't take Waller over T. Higgins. If it's Waller versus Keenan Allen in tight end premium, I would think long and hard about Waller there.
Love it. Definitely check out the draft plan articles. Jared said they're free right now. That alone get you to Draft Shark's website. It's really, really cool stuff. So just to reiterate, if you're picking from the 7 spot, Jared wants you on Austin Eckler or Stephon Diggs. And in the 2nd round, we're looking at one of these high-end wide receivers or Tony Pollard. And 3rd round, he wants you to go with Mark Andrews if he's available. If not, we're going wide receiver again. And you've got every single pick. And how many rounds deep do you go with these, Jared?
We go, let me check. It's
15 or so, right?
16 rounds.
Yep. Yeah, so they go very deep, and a lot of these guys have had a lot of hits. Matt Schoaf came on with Billy and I, for a tight end episode. It was great. And Jared, again, you've seen him a lot on Player Profiles, so go support their work at Draft Sharks. Want to keep this going, and now I want to talk about a couple players that are kind of steaming up, Jared, and we got to kind of change our approach to them based on where the ADP market is. And one guy is my guy, Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is a guy that I've been, drafting all summer long. I was taking him all the time in the 2nd round when I could on Underdog and in FFPC. I have a ton of exposure to him in Dynasty. I feel like this is the year. But one of my first main events, I did one of the first ones. It was slow, and I got ARSB at the 201. Now in FFPC and in NFFC, he has steamed way up. NFFC primetime drafts, which are like $1,800 entry, big ones. It's kind of like their main event. He's gone at the 105, I think 3 times this week. I took him in the NFFC at the 107. You're starting to see in FFPC a Diggs versus ARSB consideration at times. You're oftentimes getting exposure to him, at this 108 now, 109. It sounds close, but it's not. It's a huge leap he's made. Do you think this is justified? Where are you at on ARSB, and where are you comfortable drafting him?
Yeah, I love St. Brown. I feel like this steam is just sort of caught up to where, we at Draft Sharks, and I've been drafting him all along. Like, he is 11th in our overall PPR rankings. So I'd be definitely comfortable taking him, at the back end of round 1. I have so many Amon-Ra St. Brown CD Lamb starts. Like that's probably my most popular first 2 pick start of all the drafts I've done.
And you get that week 17 sweat. You love that sweat too. I love that one. I have a ton of, we'll have to split the pot because I have a ton of those as well on Underdog. I guess it's fine. I'm okay splitting it with you, Jared. And you also were able to go Jahmyr Gibbs in the 3rd and get a bunch of exposure to a bunch of different Cowboys and Lions. So that's super fun. I'm totally with you. I feel like with Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's people that truly believe this is a Cooper Kupp 2021 type, target total, a Michael Thomas 2020 type target total, where he's just going to be targeted so much, his usage is just going to be so insane that he could be the cheat code where you're drafting wide receiver 1, at the tail end of the first round. Are you on that train? Does he have a path to wide receiver 1 overall? Is he that sort of player?
I think he would need a ton of volume, right? Because he's not necessarily a big play guy, and he's not like a huge touchdown guy. Not touchdowns are fickle, obviously. He could score 11 times in a season, and it wouldn't be a big surprise. For me, like the top 4 wide receivers, Jefferson, Chase, Hill, Kupp. I couldn't take St. Brown over any of those 4. I don't think I could take him over Diggs. Beyond that, like I'm okay. Like I think so. I guess pick 6, 7. I think you can start to consider him. My one concern with St. Brown is if we think St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta are gonna open the season as the top 3 targets in this passing game. They're all short range targets. I'm just curious how that's gonna work out. How they're gonna split it when they all kind of work in the same areas of the field.
Yeah, I think that it's an argument for Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones as like late best ball targets these days, because stylistically they're going to have to get something out of those guys. Not saying to go get them on your redraft teams by any means, unless you're Billy Muzio, the Marvin Jones truther. But those guys I think are going to have a little bit more of a role than some people think. I also think that they could be, again, they're also going to be targeting David Montgomery a little more out of the backfield when he's in, because I believe in the offense. I believe in the scheme. I believe they'll score points. I just don't quite understand how, because a lot of those guys are going to be those kind of low A dot looks. But I think the argument for me for ARSB is 23 years old. He went over 100 receptions last year, went over 90 receptions as a rookie. I think it's sort of an argument for unknown upside, where I'm taking a 23-year-old who's ascending versus a guy like Stephon Diggs, where we might have already – the historical bet would be we've already seen the best season Stephon Diggs has ever had. We can cite outliers where, we can cite historical guys that had unbelievable smash seasons after age 30, but it's still when the cliff falls from some of these guys, it can fall off dramatically. That being, I'm taking Stephon Diggs, but I think that's the argument is, there's this group of 30-year-olds versus this 23-year-old in Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think it's sort of the unknown upside. Would you kind of agree with that? Factors in a little bit in some of this team?
Yep. I feel a bit safer about Stephon Diggs. Again, the what we call him, the billionaire Terry McLaurin.
We're going with that. We're going with that, Jared. We're going to have t-shirts made.
I love it. St. Brown is definitely the one that should still be ascending and definitely probably has the higher ceiling this year. The one thing I think people too miss about St. Brown's 2022 season, he obviously missed the one game. There were 2 other games where he played less than 35% of the offensive snaps. I think he was, limited by an ankle in one and got knocked out with a concussion in the other. So, his actual numbers in healthy games were even better than, what they look like in the final fantasy standings last year.
So Amon-Ra St. Brown is super interesting. The other guy who has been steaming up is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, we're starting to see him, much like Pollard. You'll sometimes run into a draft where Garrett Wilson's going to be taken like 11th, 12th, 13th. Yeah. But I've oftentimes seen drafters have to make a decision in the second round. Maybe you're holding the 205, the 204, 206, and you're faced with Garrett Wilson versus Davante Adams. This is another situation where a very, very, very successful fantasy player over the years who's getting a little bit older versus one with this incredible unknown upside in going to his second year in Garrett Wilson. Where are you at on Davante Adams versus Garrett Wilson when you're on the clock?
Yeah, man, I'm such a boomer, but I do take Davante Adams over Garrett Wilson for the most part. And I won't take Garrett Wilson at the 1-2 turn. That's just too early for me. It's nothing to do with him. It's the Jets offensive line is a major problem. It looked like a problem, heading into training camp, and everything we've heard out of Jets camp is the O-line, especially the tackle spots, have not been good. And then, it's Aaron Rodgers. He's a future Hall of Famer. I get it, but He's almost 40 now. He's had some injury issues. I think his play did drop off a little bit last year. So he's obviously a massive upgrade over what the Jets had at quarterback last season. But I don't think it's like, prime Rodgers where Wilson's getting a top 5 real life quarterback. So, and with Adams, Jimmy Garoppolo terrifies me, but I'm just betting on Adams' track record of target earning ability and touchdown scoring and just overall fantasy production.
Yeah, it's funny. So I do, the dynasty rankings with Dario Offstein, and Billy does most of the redraft rankings, and Dario helps him as well. But I often get into, rankings conversations with these guys, and Devontae Adams has been one that Billy has been off of for a while. Dario has been on big time at ADP. So this is like a real tilting situation, Jared, because last year he had his most targets, most air yards of his entire career, first year in Vegas. Now Waller is no longer there, and certainly Waller didn't have the role we thought last year, but still the presence of him and the fact that was still the scheme to go to Adams. And you had the perfect storm season for Josh Jacobs, where Jacobs was so efficient. So I think that like second round Devontae Adams kind of reminds me a little bit about some of the last couple of seasons where Derrick Henry hit, but he kind of was faded by drafters. It's going to swing big time one way or another, because either you're going to get, I don't think it's going to be, I think it's either Devontae Adams kind of returns what he did last year, or there's some big, huge fall off for this offense, and he ends up hurting you. I don't think it's going to be some middle ground. So I've kind of tried to mix in some Adams exposure. Wilson versus Adams, I want to say both. That's a huge cop-out, but I'm drafting both of them right now, and I have been willing to steam up Wilson because I understand the question marks with Rodgers and the Jets offense, but I just think he is a incredibly unique talent. And it reminds me a little bit of second year Odell Beckham, where Beckham went like for 20 points a game. And I think Wilson has that sort of talent. I'll ask you this, Jared, because we do some dynasty. We're actually in a dynasty startup with each other right now. If there was a wide receiver in the NFL that was going to crack the big two and make it into a big three and reach the Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase level a year from now, who would it be among all wide receivers in the NFL?
Could be Wilson. I would also throw out CD Lamb, who I think, I don't know if he's just been so steady since he entered the league, but I mean, I think he was an awesome prospect coming out, and he's really, done nothing to dissuade me that he's still, that level of prospect. So I would go Lamb 1 and then Garrett Wilson 2 as, guys that, could creep into that top 2.
Yeah. So for me, that's part of the reason I want to push him up, because I think if he creeps into that top 2, it means that, every person I speak to that's sharp brings up Wilson as one of those names that could creep into the top 2. And I think the way he does it is he has a top 5 wide receiver season. So I understand the concerns, but sometimes talent just wins out. So I love Wilson this year. I want to talk about another receiver. When we talked in May, we discussed Calvin Ridley, and and I believe you were on the Ridley train then, you were on the negative side. Okay. Excuse me. Yep. So Calvin Ridley, since we last spoke, last time we talked, it was Calvin Ridley was going 10 spots ahead of Christian Kirk. Do you think that's correct? And me, you and Billy talked about it, and it was May. And now it's like, we talked earlier in the show about positive media reports, positive teammate reports. Jacksonville is all in on Calvin Ridley in terms of, big media, big teammate, like everybody's kind of all in on this. The gap is now about 35 spots. So the gap keeps widening between Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. And not only that, you are starting to see Calvin Ridley be selected ahead of Keenan Allen, ahead of DK Metcalf, and on certain sites he's past T. Higgins. He's at 26 overall in FFPC main events, and I've been seeing him selected sometimes inside the second round. Where are you at on Ridley at this new ADP? Are you just shocked by it? Does it make sense to you? Makes sense for us, Jared.
Yeah, I was off Ridley early I don't remember when we did that podcast. It might have been like April or May. My whole thing was just, we've barely seen this guy over the last 2 years. I don't know what Ridley is anymore. It seems like we've gotten that answer, right? Based on everything we've heard out of Jack's camp, all the training camp highlights we've seen, like it looks like he's still the Calvin Ridley that, put up a big season last time he was healthy in Atlanta. So Ridley has shot up my rankings. He's shot up the Draft Sharks rankings. I'm still like below consensus on him though. The steam just stays ahead of me on Calvin Ridley. I can't pull the trigger on him in round 2. It's again, it's even tough for me. I'm not taking him over T Higgins. I get the argument Ridley over someone like Keenan Allen in the middle of round 3, but like you said, it's kind of rare that Ridley makes it to the middle of round 3 anymore.
It's one of those things where it's a little bit of FOMO for me because I've been fading him in so many of these like FFPC, NFFC leagues that you don't want to fade a guy that's going to smash. And I think that they look at him as the alpha there. I think that's kind of clear, but again, I can't do it, Jared. Like when there's big money on the line, I haven't been able to really pull the trigger. I almost did it in a draft I'm doing with the Guilds and Andrew Schellenberg. We almost took Ridley, but we ended up going a different direction. So I'm with you. It's a little bit surprising. How about Christian Kirk, where he's been pushed down to? Does he, by the fact that you're off of Ridley, are you de facto on Kirk at cost?
I still like Zay Jones the best at value. Man, I'm throwing out. I'm such a boomer.
Yeah, man, you're Zay Jones. Yeah, and every wide receiver over 30 is Jared's guys so far.
But I mean, Zay Jones as well. He's like wide receiver 50 or something in ADP.
Yeah.
Listen, he's still going to be on the field, almost every pass play for them. He had a nice season last year. I do want to be buying into that Jags passing game. I definitely don't want to be fading it. So I like Zay Jones at cost, and I think Christian Kirk is fine at cost too. I know there's some concern about the preseason usage. He's only been playing in 3 wide receiver sets. Even if that keeps up into the regular season, I think they're going to have 3 wide receivers on the field for most of their passing plays. So it's not a major concern for me. I think Kirk is a nice pick at cost right now.
Yeah, I'm fine with him. I'd say I'm neutral. There's a couple of these upside wide receivers that are in his range that I'm more into, but I think he's fine, and I think he is a little bit pushed down. So that'll be interesting to see how the early target distribution goes in Jacksonville. But if we go into game 1 and game 2, and you walk out of 2 weeks of data, and Calvin Ridley has 16 targets and Christian Kirk has 14, you might not feel great about that gap unless Ridley's just a touchdown machine. And Ridley throughout his career has never been like this target vacuum. And he hasn't been a yardage vacuum. I think he's got 1 season over 1,000 yards in his career. So it's a big tilting type pick. I don't want to say that he's going to bust because I don't think he will bust at this extent, but it reminds me slightly of the steam with Cortland Sutton and Gabe Davis last year, where the steam just kept going up and up and up and up and up. And it reached ahead where you'd see those guys sneaking in the second. It's kind of the same thing. Ridley obviously seems a little bit more of a traditional alpha than those guys, but I don't know, man. History has a way of repeating itself in draft steam, Jared.
Yeah. I mean, the target share point is why I just can't quite get there with Ridley. Because I don't think it's likely he gets to like a 26-27% target share just with Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram being there. Ingram, I don't know if people still don't like the guy because all the times they've burned him or, he's burned them, but he had an excellent season last year and the Jags gave him big money for the season. He's going to remain a big part of that passing game.
You have a Parker Washington question in the chat, Jared. What are your thoughts on Jacksonville Jaguars receiver Parker Washington off show sheet?
I do not have many thoughts on Parker Washington. He was a 6th round rookie wide receiver, so he's a long shot, and he's obviously buried on that depth chart. So if you want to stash him in Dynasty, fine, but he's not high on my wish list.
There you go. So want to talk about the 3rd round. I talked about this a little bit with Mike Leone about how the 3rd round has some landmines. It always does historically. But I specifically want to look at the 3rd round, and we're also going to push the 4th round into it at the running back position. I'm going to leave Jonathan Taylor out of consideration because there's a lot of question marks, and I think he's polarizing in terms of – we'll leave it alone. We're going to leave it alone. We're also going to leave Jahmyr Gibbs out of this because I think Jahmyr Gibbs, realistically, if you're still drafting, he's going to go at the 2-3 turn in a lot of these high-stakes events. So I saw him go 20 overall like twice this week, so he's steaming up. So let's look at the nitty-gritty. These guys are all being drafted in the back half of the 3rd all the way to the end of the 4th. Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and Aaron Jones. These guys are kind of interesting, but it seems like there's some potential landmines. And I'm not like overly enthusiastic. I think for these guys, it's more of a structural thing for me. But where are you at on these guys? Let's go lightning round. Joe Mixon at cost, end of the third.
So, I mean, honestly, my answer for all these guys is none of them in round three for the most part. Round four is when I start to consider them. So Joe Mixon, I do like in round four.
Okay. Joe Mixon, do you see him just as kind of a structural pick for you as your RB2, or would you be okay as him as your RB1 on like a punt RB team?
Yeah, so like even in round four, I'm mostly considering these guys on teams where I've started 3 wideouts or, 2 wideouts and a tight end. I don't feel like I need to take one of these guys in round 4 because I think, as you alluded to at some point during the show, those round 6 and 7 running backs look really good to me. And I think a lot of those guys can kind of match the production these guys going in, round 3 or round 4 can give you.
They're definitely landmine-ish. Like, I don't want to draft Najee Harris right now. I have concerns about Aaron Jones. I have big time concerns about, Mixon when he gets steamed up. Like you said, last time we talked, Jared, he was like a 6th rounder, a 5th rounder, and now he's corrected. It's an overcorrection in my opinion. So ETN's the one that's a little bit intriguing to me. Where are you at on ETN? Because if we take a step back and we say that was Travis Etienne's rookie season last year, he becomes a little bit more intriguing, which it kind of is, and certainly his first year with Doug Peterson. Where are you at on ETN in the 4th?
I like ETN in round 4. I mean, I guess if you made me rank all those guys, I would go Stevenson, Mixon, ETN. Those are the 3 I'm like comfortable with taking in round 4. I mean, with ETN, I get he has issues. He struggled in short yardage last year. The receiving, the passing game volume wasn't where we want it to be, but he still turned in an excellent season on the ground in what you said was basically his rookie season. He's a former 1st round pick. Like, there's a lot of stuff still to like about Travis Etienne, even if he gets, 60-65% of the backfield work. I think he's good enough, and I think that offense is going to be good enough to, let him deliver at least round 4 value.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I would love to know if they were going to target him just a little bit more. Like, if they could give him 2% more target share, I'd be all over him. But Tank Bigsby is one guy I want to talk about as well. And I'm going to throw him in this mix of these handcuffs that are steaming up. Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Warren, and Tank Bigsby have all had very positive vibes. With Bigsby and Charbonnet, we're looking at day 2 rookie picks. Jalen Warren caught almost 30 balls last year as a rookie, as an undrafted free agent. He looks fantastic in the preseason. Where are you at on these 3 guys? They've steamed up to round like 9. Are you in on any of these guys at cost? And if so, which one?
I'm in on all 3 at cost. Again, just depending where I'm at with my build when I get to, round 9 or round 10. I think Charbonnet has the best chance to either take over the backfield or at least turn it into something close to a 50-50 split without an injury to the guy ahead of him. I just think the talent gap between Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet and the draft capital gap between them, right? I mean, they were both 2nd round picks, correct? I just think, that's the smallest here. So I think that Charbonnet turning that into a committee or even, taking over for Walker at some point is most likely. I do think Warren and Bigsby are mostly handcuffs. I don't think either one. I think Warren has a better chance to become a standalone fantasy option this season, but I think they're both more handcuffs, but I think they're 2 of the best handcuff picks you can make.
I completely agree with you. I think we're in lockstep. Jalen Warren, I think if you are completely punting running back, you can throw him in your flex, and I think he's going to give you like 10 points a game in PPR, right out the gate. And what's interesting to me is both of us don't want to draft Najee Harris, and Najee Harris is going in the 4th round. And I'll say that Najee Harris is one of the toughest guys in football. He plays every single week. He's a warrior. No one's questioning that. But a lot of times when you play every single game for back-to-back seasons, you're going to miss a little bit of time. He also played through foot injuries last year. Remember this time last year, people were saying like Liz Frank with Najee, and then he didn't miss any time. So I think that Jalen Warren has the juice. And I think that if we're fading Najee, I think you want some Jalen Warren. I think that Pittsburgh offense is going to be better than people think. I know you talked up Kenny Pickett earlier in the spring, and people thought it was silly. Now you look super sharp, Jared. So I'm with you on all those guys. And I'll say I love your call on Charbonnet, where it can be a committee and he can still be the one you want to play, because I think he's the better receiver and he's better around the goal line. And I think if it's a committee, but he gets those high value touches, I think Charbonnet could be like a very, very fun player that could have some spike weeks. And if Ken Walker misses, let's take the step back. Let's say that Najee Harris goes down. Let's say that Ken Walker goes down. And let's say that Travis Etienne goes down. And all three of these guys are now the RB1. Who are his draft sharks ranking highest on a weekly basis?
It'd be either Charbonnet or Tank Bigsby.
Yes.
I just think Warren is in the worst offense, so that would hurt his case. But I think to me, Bigsby's probably in the best offense. I think Charbonnet's a better player, more proven in the passing game. So I guess I'd lean towards Charbonnet, but Bigsby would be right there. Like they'd both be like flirting with RB1 territory in the rankings, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. For me, I think it's Bigsby, because you nailed it. It's the quality of the offense, and he's also a solid receiver. So if I think that Hasty's a little bit annoying for anybody in Jacksonville right now. He's not going to disappear, but I think that at the end of the day, if Travis Etienne were to miss time, we would be ranking Tank Bigsby higher than we're ranking Travis Etienne at any point at the beginning of the season. So if I'm drafting a heavy running back team, and I don't need to worry about getting running back points out of one of these kind of selections, then Bigsby, if he's like my running back 4, is an absolute hammer that could push my team over the edge. If I'm a 0 RB team or a hero RB team, I'm probably leaning Warren because I want to be able to use them, but they're all super interesting. We also see a couple of running back risers, Jared. Last time we talked, Javonte Williams was an 8th round pick. James Cook was going in the 8th round. Dameon Pierce was safely in the 6th round, and Khalil Herbert was like in the 11th. Now you're starting to see James Cook rise up to, he's right around like, let's call it running back 21-ish. Dameon Pierce, people are getting a little bit more enthusiastic for. Javonte Williams is wild. You're seeing Javonte Williams go in the 4th round a lot of times. So his ADP might reflect a 5th round price, but like in some of these big money drafts, people are betting on him on like the 405. And then Khalil Herbert has settled in. It doesn't seem like it's a argument. Khalil Herbert is your Chicago Bears running back, and people have pushed him up to the 8th round. On these sort of rising prices, which of these guys are you in on at cost?
I'm most in on Pierce and Herbert. If James Cook's going to be going RB21, I'm going to have to be out on him as much as that hurts, because I want to be on the lead back in that Bills offense. James Cook has never handled big volume in his career, and going back to his days at Georgia, I just don't think he's going to get big volume in Buffalo. Like I think he's going to catch 50 passes or so, something like that, and he's probably going to carry 10 or so times per game. So that's nice if I can get him in RB 26 to RB 30 range. RB 21 is just too pricey for me. Javonte, I took so much of him in like round 7 or 8. Throughout the offseason, I'm kind of just good being done with my Javonte Williams exposure if he's going to be, going in round 4 or 5.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, and I actually think that, I have my Javonte at the cheap cost, much like yourself, and I think if Pirine drops enough, he's kind of interesting. So, and shout out to Senior Football, who doesn't like us talking about hypotheticals with handcuffs. Why are you drafting the handcuffs if there's not hypotheticals, Senior Football? So
have you played fantasy football, Senior Football? Like guys get hurt.
Well, he's clear. He's a senior football, Jared. He's been doing this for a long time. Right. So let's keep diving into and looking at running back values. We talked about Khalil Herbert, how he moved up in an ambiguous backfield that's no longer ambiguous. It's still somewhat ambiguous. We're still I still like Roshan Johnson. I'm sure that there's Deonta Foreman people out there, but game 1, Khalil Herbert's going to get his touches. Yeah. One backfield where none of the guys was getting drafted inside the top 36 running backs, except for Devon Achane at times, was Miami. Miami has Devon Achane, who's now dropping because of a shoulder injury, Jeff Wilson, and Raheem Mostert. And that's the team. And Mike McDaniel has praised his running backs. They did not sign Dalvin Cook. This is your running back room with guys like Salvon Ahmed and Myles Gaskin still on the roster. Do you see value to be plucked here?
Yeah, Jeff Wilson is one of my highest owned running backs. And I've just been dodging bullets all offseason with all these, rumors of backs going to Miami. And now we have another one, of course, with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor could ruin all my Jeff Wilson shares. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But I've been trying to mix in more Raheem Mostert as well, because I do think we're looking at something close to a 50-50 split between those two. I just have more Wilson because he's been going 2, 3, 4 rounds behind Raheem Mostert. But love those guys in best ball. They both have some big playability. I think Wilson's probably going to get most of the goal line work, so that adds to his weekly ceiling. Then even in managed leagues, I think if Wilson or Mostert is your flex play, some weeks you're okay. And I think if one of those guys goes down, then the other guy becomes like a pretty solid RB2. So I've been in on those Dolphins running backs, and I'm going to continue drafting them. I don't think they've risen enough in ADP even since the Dalvin Cook signing.
Yeah, I'm with you. It seems like a cheap source of instant fantasy points, and I feel like it's one of those things in home leagues. I think if you want to wait super late, you can draft Wilson and Mostert and kind of see which way it cuts week 1. And if one of them has a much larger touch share than we expect, I think we kind of expect a little bit of a split. But if the touch share is a little bit more one-sided, then you might be looking at a RB2 for a few weeks. So I like attacking that backfield. And God, Jared, if Jonathan Taylor ends up in Miami with Mike McDaniel, good Lord, there's going to be some bag holders, because that guy is going to be incredible in that offense. But that's, I don't know. To me, I don't want to even get into these hypotheticals with Taylor because they're asking so much, and then there's so much money involved. So it seems like a pointless task. Want to pick your brain on a wide receiver? Zay Flowers looks incredible. Last night he got in the end zone. I talk about a positive vibe guy. This is a guy where he's being universally praised by the media, the coaching staff, and his teammates. This was the guy that the Ravens have come out and said, this was our wide receiver 1 in this draft class. They're unabashed with that. And I believe them because they went so close. All the wide receivers went so close that I think if a team is saying that it was their preferred wide receiver, they could have traded up one spot and got another one. So I do believe them on this one. They seem over the moon with Zay. Where are you at with Zay?
Yeah, he's my favorite of the Ravens wide receivers. And I've been drafting all three of them, even Odell Beckham, who I feel like every podcast I've been in, I've kind of been, anti Odell Beckham, but he goes late enough. He's like mid wide receiver 50s in ADP. So I've just been taking all of them because I'm, buying all the Todd Monken stuff for the Ravens, just opening it up, throwing more. They're going to get all three of those guys on the field for most of their passing plays, I think. Flowers is my favorite. Bateman's tough for me, just how disappointing he was last year, and then missing most of the offseason with more foot trouble. But I'm definitely still taking Bateman at cost 2. But it's Flowers for me if I had to pick between those 3.
Yeah, I think Flowers, we're going to see him steam up. I got him in the 8th round this week. I think he's going to start living in the 7th round, especially with some of these guys getting a little bit banged up. So I'm with you, and I like the ability to have Lamar Jackson correlation with Flowers, because I think if we're going to have Flowers in our starting lineup, it's probably going to be more likely than not like after week 6, after week 8. There's obviously a chance for some attrition if Odell misses some time, or if Bateman, goes back to the chopping block in terms of injuries. Yep. So I'm in on it. We believe in Todd Monken. Don't let us down, Todd Monken. Want to talk about your favorite breakout offense? Last year we saw Philadelphia, Miami, Jacksonville, Seattle return ADP value for multiple players just based on the offense beating expectations. Who are some offenses or one offense that you think could carry multiple guys to that sort of season?
I mean, are the Browns too obvious? I feel like we've talked about them already. But I think that's another team that I think you're going to see a shift in play calling with all the moves they've made, obviously acquiring Deshaun Watson and then all the pass catchers they've added. I just think they're going to throw it a lot more. I'm super high on the Giants right now too. It's maybe just because we saw Daniel Jones look awesome in that last preseason game. But I just think Dable is one of the best play callers in the NFL. And the wide receivers aren't great, but they added some guys. Darren Waller, obviously a massive addition. I think the O-line is going to be better this season. They have some young guys on the O-line. So, Daniel Jones, Darren Waller, and all those wide receivers. Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins are just so cheap they're going to at least open the season as like every down players. Maybe Jalen Hyatt takes one of their jobs throughout the course of the year. But early on, I think, Slayton and Hodgins are going to be pretty strong fantasy values. I've been taking a lot of Giants in August.
No, I love it. I'm with you. I think that the Giants offense is going to score a ton of points. I think they're going to be very fun. And like you, I believe in Dable. And I think that the Waller, kind of really opens them up. Everything's right with Saquon. There's just nothing but positive vibes there. And you got to figure there's going to be some shootouts in that division. Washington looks capable right now. Philadelphia certainly, and Dallas as well. Now, Jared, we're reaching an hour point. Name of the show is Targets and Sleepers. We're going to go through and we're going to give you a target and a sleeper at all 4 positions. We're going to start with Jared. Right now, who is your quarterback target?
Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert is my quarterback target as well. I've been drafting a lot of them. So we'll give a secondary target. I have liked Justin Fields recently. I think that he's reached a point with Herbert steamed up on a lot of these drafts where Justin Fields is going, after him, where we saw them side by side for a little bit. I believe in this Bears offense taking the next step forward, and I believe Justin Fields is like one of the last quarterbacks where I can get QB1 overall upside. If you're not getting Justin Herbert, who is your quarterback plan, Jared, in a perfect world?
My next target would be Deshaun Watson, and then if I don't get Watson, I'm targeting Anthony Richardson.
Love that one. Now, how about a sleeper? Give us a quarterback sleeper, Jared, that could really beat ADP. You take this any way you want. It could be a guy that's a QB2 that finishes as a QB1. It could be a guy that's a low-end QB1 that finishes as a top 5 QB.
I like Sam Howell, who's looked awesome this preseason. He gets Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator. The weapons are obviously good. Fingers crossed for Terry McLaurin's injury. And then Howell can run, right? He showed it in college. He showed it in his one start last year, and he showed it this preseason. So I think he could, finish as a top 15 fantasy quarterback.
I love that one. I think that the Washington offense could also be super consolidated if you want to guys, late stacks and get a little bit wacky, everyone, with your Washington stacks. That could be a fun one. I'll say for me, my sleeper, he's not a sleeper because he's a high-end QB2, but I think that Daniel Jones is being severely underrated right now. He had over 700 yards rushing last year in year 1. Brian Dable offense in year 2 is going to take a big next step. And they've added so many guys. It was kind of like hey, let's make fun of New York for all these slot wide receivers. But I look at it as they're going to be extremely efficient and have a lot of guys who can get first downs. And Daniel Jones is going to have a lot of red zone opportunities. I think there's a chance that you see him have an even more efficient running season, and he goes over 800 yards rushing. I think he'll set career highs in touchdown passes and total passing yards as well. And I think, again, the NFC East a little more shootout potential than we saw last year. So I'm on Jones as my quarterback sleeper. How about running back? Who is your target right now, Jared?
We haven't talked about Rachaad White yet, so I'll throw him out here. 6th, 7th round. There's questions about his rushing. I get it. Like, it wasn't pretty last year. The O-line was bad in Tampa, but White's, blocking independent metrics were not good last year. But I think he's an excellent pass catching back. I think what he showed in his final college season and then what he showed last year, like I think he's a guy that is going to catch 50 or 60 passes that you can get in around 6 or 7, which I think is just money in the bank.
Love Rachaad White. I think that Rachaad White has been a guy that I've been drafting as well. I'll go a little bit earlier with a target of mine. We talked about how the 3rd round has landmines. I've been drafting the hell out of Jahmyr Gibbs in the 3rd round. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is like, if I'm going to attack the 3rd round without taking a quarterback or a wide receiver, it's Gibbs for me. I've pushed him up as high as like the 301, but when he's somewhere in that 308 to 310 range on FFPC, I am all about Gibbs. I think that Gibbs could break the record for most receptions as a rookie running back. I think he could have a not quite Alvin Kamara rookie season, but I think he's going to be somewhere between that, Reggie Bush rookie year, CMC rookie year. I think it's going to go right up there in a historically good one. I'm all over him. And then give me a running back sleeper, Jared.
Yes, it would have been Jeff Wilson if we hadn't already talked about him, but I'll go much deeper here and give you Evan Hall of the Colts. I mean, super plus athlete and an excellent pass catcher. Like those are the 2 biggest boxes I'm looking to check out of my running backs, and Hall checks them both. So if Jonathan Taylor is traded or whatever, or he sits out the season, whatever happens, I think Hall is going to be a part of that backfield. I mean, there's nothing else there right now. I would expect them to add something else. maybe that's a Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt landing spot if Taylor is traded away. But I think Hall could really make an impact this season, especially in the passing game.
Everybody smash the like button. This is just awesome stuff from Jared. I love your Evan Hull call. I'll go the one sleeper for me, and I've been drafting James Conner when he sits there in the 8th round. I think he's a smash value there, but I think that the market is not as high on Keontae Ingram. I think Keontae Ingram is a like-for-like replacement for Conner if Conner were to miss time. And I think that Keontae, the market, the next 2 weeks is going to get a little bit more enthused with him. So it's very funny how some people are completely fading James Conner. They say he's injury prone. They say he's getting older. That's true. So if he's going to miss time, you could take Keontae Ingram. And also, you're able to easily handcuff James Conner. If you like handcuffing, I can draft one in the 8th round and one in like the 18th round without using a lot of draft capital. I have a running back spot locked down. How about tight end, Jared? Who is your big target at tight end?
Tight end, it's Darren Waller at this point. I still see him in the non-tight end premium drafts, getting into round 4 or 5 quite a bit. And I think, again, I think he's going to be right there with Hawkinson with a good chance to finish as tight end 3 this season.
Love Darren Waller. He's steamed up so much. He's certainly a guy that I'm comfortable taking the 3rd round of tight end premium. And then in non-tight end premium, I'm making him a priority as well. Where do you have him target-wise, ballpark, Jared? Because I know you're continually updating your projections.
Yeah, I can tell you right now.
North of 115 on the targets?
So we haven't projected for 15 games, but we have him at 108 targets. So if you give him a full season, he'd be, at like 120.
I love it. I said 130, and a couple of stat people didn't love it, but I'm into it. I think that there's if all I have to do is beat Jared's projections by like 8%, and we're right there. We're right there, everyone. So Darren Waller.
I'm still pretty conservative with his target share, honestly. I have his target share lower than what it was at his, peak in, with the Raiders. So there's definitely room for him to beat our projections.
2 seasons ago, he had a 19 target game to start out the season. If we get that in week 1 in FFPC tight end premium scoring, people are going to be losing their minds. I'll say for me, Waller's a fantastic answer. Dalton Kincaid. I love Dalton Kincaid. I think we're shooting for ceiling at the tight end position. It is a replaceable position. Every single season, we get guys come up on the waiver wire at the tight end spot. It happens literally every single year. There's a guy that we haven't talked about all summer. We've probably talked about him, but a lot of people haven't talked about him. And that guy's going to end up finishing inside the top 12 tight ends. So a replaceable position where the scoring's flat. Give me this elite weapon. The Bills are using him out of the slot. He flashed in the preseason. I think that they have a big plan for him. I think he could get to 90 targets as a rookie if everything works out well. So I'm big time on Dalton Kincaid. How about a sleeper at the tight end position, Jared?
I am so in on Luke Musgrave. He was a super exciting prospect, not necessarily if you look at the college stat sheet, because, he missed a lot of time and didn't put up massive numbers, but you watch the film, look at the athleticism, he gets round 2 draft capital. And then everything we've heard since he arrived in Green Bay, and then everything we've seen in the preseason, Musgrave has run a route on nearly 90% of Jordan Love's dropbacks this preseason. That is like rarefied air for a tight end. If he stays above an 80% route rate in the regular season, it's going to be tough for him to not finish as a top 12 fantasy tight end, just being out there that often. So I'm all in on Musgrave.
I've seen you get really behind him. Dwayne McFarland is as well. There's a lot of sharp people on him. I think it's a usage play. He's a guy that at Player Profiler, we've been super, super high on. He's a very on-brand type player for us as terms of a dynasty prospect because the athleticism is absolutely through the roof. And I think that he's like the late steamer. I saw him go kind of closer to Laporta. He's past Greg Dulcich, which has been a faller, which was crazy. If I told you 6 weeks ago that Musgrave was going to leap, Greg Dulcich, you would have said that's crazy. But this is where we're at. Luke Musgrave, if you want him, reach for him based on your league's ADP because somebody else in your league will. I'll say for me, there's a lot of interesting sleeper tight ends. I feel like the one that sometimes goes undrafted in non-tight end premium that is a very boring player but could see very predictable weekly volume is Hayden Hurst. I think that this Carolina offense is going to struggle. but I think Hayden Hurst is going to be a security blanket for Bryce Young. And I think he could have a career high in targets. Last year, we saw him have, some moments with Cincinnati. I think this year, at the end of the day, this is a guy that the rookie is going to like playing with. So it's incredibly boring. No one's going to say great pick, but I think Hayden Hurst could return some value. Now, give us your target wide receiver, Jared.
Target wide receiver. I'm going to go Christian. There's a lot of guys I like. I'm going to go Christian Watson, though. I just think what he should, I guess I'm in on the Packers passing game here. I better hope Jordan Love delivers. Just what Christian Watson showed as a rookie. And even if you go back to his prospect profile coming into the NFL, like I called him a boomer bust prospect. Like I thought there was a chance that Watson was like out of the league in 5 years, but what he showed as a rookie makes me think he's, going to hit the boom side of that. And I just think there's so much room for him to claim a big target share, right? Because he's competing with another second-year wide receiver in Romeo Doubs, a rookie wide receiver in Jaden Reed. Like I think there's a path for Christian Watson to, get 25, 26% of the targets. And if he does that with his, big playability, I think, he could finish as a top 12 fantasy wideout.
I'm completely with you on Christian Watson. That's a guy that Billy Muzio and I have been talking up for months now. Again, I think that he's living in the fourth round. You don't have to reach and take him in the third. I think the upside is incredible with him. You said Christian Watson, so I will add a guy you can get a little bit later right now, and that's Brandon Ayuk. I think Brandon Ayuk is going to have a very big season. I haven't been drafting Kittle lately. I think that my San Francisco preference has been Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I think both those guys are going to score well, but I think Ayuk has the kind of ceiling that when we get to the money weeks and some of these tournament type plays, I think Brandon Ayuk could be extremely exciting. This is a guy that took a big step forward last year, went over 1,000 yards. He's still a young player in the league, and he's ascending. There's nothing but positivity for him this offseason, where we've seen him kind of bump heads with Shanahan in the past. I think this is going to be like his big career season, and I can get him, somewhat at an affordable level. So wide receiver sleeper. This is a tough one. Last year we got Zay Jones, who was largely undrafted, finishes as like wide receiver 25. The year before, Jared, we had Hunter Renfrow finish as like wide receiver 11. So we do see undrafted wide receivers sometimes really, really help us in fantasy, but it's harder and harder. Give us a lower drafted guy or an undrafted guy that you could see making an impact.
Yeah, this guy's not undrafted, but he's still available in the double-digit rounds for the most part. Nico Collins, who is a big, athletic, young wide receiver who took a nice step forward in his second season last year in terms of both target share, yards per route run, PFF receiving grade, all that stuff rose from his rookie year. I think he's the clear number one in Houston, and I think CJ Stroud is going to be a pretty significant upgrade over what they had last year. So I think Nico could emerge as someone we're putting in our lineups as a wide receiver 3 every week.
Any hope for Tank Dell in that offense?
Yeah, I mean, he looked awesome in that first preseason game. I was skeptical of him in the pre-draft process just because of the size. But the tape is there, the college production is there. If he can just clear that hurdle of just being a bit lighter than we like our wide receivers to be. Again, I think Nico's going to be the number one receiver there, but there's definitely a path for Tank Dell to eventually emerge as the number 2 guy in the passing game.
So for me, my sleeper is still Marvin Mims, and I think it's going to take a couple things for it to happen. And I wouldn't expect this to be a guy that I'm going to plug into my lineup over the first, few weeks of the season. But a lot of times the wide receivers that have really helped us out in fantasy have been second half of the year plays. And I think Mims has that ability where if his role expands, if we're able to stash him, he could be the kind of guy that's in our wide receiver 2 or 3, wide receiver 2 or 3 spot or flex down the stretch. I truly believe in the talent. He's already running. He's already on the field on wide receiver in 3 wide receiver sets, which is sort of like half the battle. And I don't think the talent is even to be questioned. I think he's a stud. And I'll go a little bit deeper. I think if an end game type target right now in drafts, Michael Wilson for Arizona, a big physical 3rd round wide receiver. I think he's going to be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. I think this is a player that the team needs. He's different than any of the other wide receivers on the team. Like Hollywood Brown is not your traditional outside receiver. Rondell Moore is a slot guy. Dortch is a slot guy. I think towards the end of the year, the Michael Wilson role is going to grow, and I think he's the kind of guy that you're going to want to keep as a stash, especially in 20-man formats like the FFPC and NFFC. Jared, you've been so generous with your time as always. I love talking to you today. This was a real help to anybody listening in. If you're watching the show right now on YouTube, please smash the like button. And Jared, let everybody know where they can find you and what you have coming up.
Yeah, Twitter at Smola DS, and then all my work is on Draft Sharks. Big thing, Draft Sharks, our rankings are updated literally, like almost, not literally, but almost 24/7 outside of when I'm sleeping for 6 hours a night. Those babies are updated. Our draft war room's up and running. That's going to give you a customized cheat sheet, tailored to your exact league scoring rules. So if you have a draft coming up, I would highly recommend checking that out.
No, that's awesome. And how did you do in the Deep End Invitational last night? You drafted, Jared?
Yes, I did. I like my team. I got Josh Allen at 104. It's super flex. He's my 101 in super flex. And then I was able to get the Deshaun Watson in round 3 there, which I liked as well. So I came away with a better team than I thought I was going to have, because those are obviously tough rooms. They're loaded with excellent fantasy players.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm drafting in the Deep End Invitational this evening. I'm going to split a team with Andrew Schellenberg from the GOAT District. We're going to stream that at some point on a GOAT District right here on Player Profiler. But make sure you're tuning in every evening. Mike Shope and Adam Krautwurst are doing a fantastic job with this Deep End Invitational. Really, really cool shows. Last night, a lot of people tuned in to watch. Tonight, I'm in one with Matt Kelly, the Podfather, Billy Muzio's in my draft, JJ Zachariason's in my draft, Dwayne McFarland's in my draft, Britt Flynn of Fantasy Alarm. Richard Rebar's in this one. It's loaded. It's going to be challenging. I love it. I love that we're not doing like 30 rounds this year, Jared, like we did in years past, but It's a lot of fun. Definitely check that out. And then for press coverage, check out my episode yesterday with Mike Leone. That was fantastic. That one, we covered a lot of stuff that Jared and I did not cover. Definitely check that one out. And then tune in tomorrow, sometime during the day. We are going to drop the FFPC main event draft that I competed in last night, where I split a team with Abib Agbatoba of 1st and 15 and Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points. The three of us drafted together. We really liked our build. It was a tilting draft. It'll be really fun to watch. So look for that tomorrow. And everybody stick with us right up until opening kickoff, because we got you covered at Player Profiler.